Picture this. You're standing on the edge of a coastline, waves lapping at your feet, completely unaware that beneath those waters lies a sprawling metropolis that once housed millions. Cities with towering pyramids, intricate road networks, and technologies we can barely comprehend today. What if I told you that scattered across our ocean floors are the remnants of civilizations so advanced, so mysterious, that their very existence challenges everything we thought we knew about human history? Welcome to a journey that will shatter your understanding of the past. I'm about to reveal evidence of sunken cities that don't just represent lost settlements, but entire prehistoric empires that thrived when sea levels were dramatically lower than they are today. We're talking about civilizations that built monuments rivaling the pyramids, developed sophisticated urban planning, and possessed knowledge that seems impossible for their supposed time period. But here's what makes this absolutely mind-blowing. These aren't just random ruins scattered on the ocean floor. The pattern of their locations, the similarity of their construction techniques, and the timing of their submersion all point to something far more extraordinary than isolated city-states. We're looking at potential evidence of a global prehistoric civilization that was wiped out by rising seas at the end of the last ice age. Over the next several episodes, we're going to dive deep into the most compelling underwater archaeological discoveries of our time. I've spent months researching the latest sonar mapping data, analysing construction techniques that shouldn't exist, and uncovering connections between sites separated by thousands of miles of ocean. What I've found will challenge everything you think you know about human civilization. Today, we're starting with the foundations. The geological evidence that proves vast areas of our current ocean floor were once dry land, teeming with life and human activity. Then we'll explore the most stunning underwater discoveries that mainstream archaeology struggles to explain. Finally, I'll show you the disturbing pattern that connects these sites across the globe, suggesting something far more significant than random coastal settlements. Let me set the stage with something that will completely shift your perspective. Imagine Earth 20,000 years ago. The planet was locked in an ice age, with massive glaciers covering much of North America and Europe. But here's the crucial part that most people don't realize. All that water frozen in ice had to come from somewhere. The oceans were 300 to 400 feet lower than they are today. That means vast stretches of what we now consider ocean floor were actually fertile coastal plains, river deltas, and habitable land. Think about the implications of this for just a moment. The Mediterranean Sea, much smaller, with land bridges connecting continents. The English Channel, completely dry, allowing easy passage between Britain and Europe. The Bering Strait, a wide land bridge that connected Asia and North America. But most importantly for our investigation, the continental shelves around every continent were exposed, creating millions of square miles of prime real estate that humans could have inhabited. Now, conventional archaeology tells us that during this period, humans were simple hunter-gatherers, living in small nomadic tribes, barely surviving the harsh Ice Age conditions. They supposedly lacked the organization, technology, and population to build anything more complex than temporary shelters. But what if this entire narrative is wrong? What if these exposed continental shelves, with their mild coastal climates and abundant resources, were actually home to thriving civilizations? Here's where it gets interesting. When the Ice Age ended around 12,000 years ago, those massive glaciers didn't melt slowly over millennia. Recent geological evidence suggests the melting happened in catastrophic pulses, with sea levels rising hundreds of feet in just decades or centuries. Any civilizations that had developed on those exposed coastal plains would have been completely submerged, their cities and monuments lost beneath the waves. But they wouldn't have vanished without a trace. Stone structures, massive foundations, and carefully planned urban layouts would have survived on the ocean floor, waiting to be discovered by our modern technology. And that's exactly what we're finding. Let me give you your first taste of what's out there. Off the coast of Japan lies Yonaguni, a series of massive stone structures that have sparked decades of debate. At first glance, these look like natural rock formations. But when you examine them closely, the evidence for human construction becomes overwhelming. We're talking about perfectly straight edges, precise 90-degree angles, and carved steps that descend deep into the ocean floor. The mainstream archaeological community insists these are natural formations, carved by ocean currents and geological processes. But here's what they can't explain. The structures include what appear to be roads, staircases, and even carved symbols. The geometry is too perfect, too purposeful to be natural. We're looking at what could be the remains of a massive temple complex or administrative centre, submerged when sea levels rose at the end of the Ice Age. But Yonaguni is just the beginning. Off the coast of India, near the city of Dwarka, divers have discovered massive stone blocks arranged in clear urban patterns. These aren't random rocks scattered by tsunamis. We're talking about foundation stones, arranged in rectangular patterns that suggest planned city blocks. Carbon dating of organic material found within these structures has yielded dates going back over 8,000 years, placing their construction well before the supposed dawn of urban civilization. The Indian discovery is particularly fascinating because it aligns perfectly with ancient texts. Sanskrit literature describes Dwarka as a magnificent city built by Lord Krishna, eventually swallowed by the ocean. For centuries, scholars dismissed these texts as pure mythology. But now we have physical evidence of a substantial urban settlement in exactly the location described in these ancient stories. What if these weren't myths at all, but historical accounts of real cities lost to rising seas? Moving to the Mediterranean, recent sonar surveys have revealed something extraordinary off the coast of Spain. Massive geometric patterns on the ocean floor, too regular and purposeful to be natural. These formations include what appear to be circular structures, radiating outward in perfect symmetry. The size and scope of these features suggest they were once part of a major urban centre, possibly rivaling ancient Rome in its complexity. But here's what makes these discoveries truly revolutionary. They're not isolated incidents. Similar underwater structures have been found off the coasts of Cuba, the Bahamas, Lebanon, Turkey, and dozens of other locations around the world. We're not talking about a few random settlements that happened to get flooded. We're looking at a global pattern of sophisticated urban development that existed during a time when mainstream archaeology insists such development was impossible. The Cuban discovery might be the most startling of all. Deepwater sonar mapping has revealed what appears to be a massive city complex, complete with pyramids, rectangular buildings, and circular structures. The site covers several square miles and sits at depths that would require the structures to be over 10,000 years old, based on known sea level changes. That places their construction firmly in the Paleolithic period, when humans were supposedly incapable of such architectural achievements. Now I know what you're thinking. If these discoveries are so significant, why isn't this front-page news in every scientific journal? Why isn't mainstream archaeology embracing these findings? The answer reveals something troubling about how our understanding of history is controlled and shaped. There's an enormous investment in the current historical narrative. Textbooks, university curricula, museum exhibitions, and academic careers are all built on the foundation of established chronology. Admitting that sophisticated civilizations existed thousands of years earlier than previously thought would require rewriting not just history books, but entire academic disciplines. The financial and professional costs would be staggering. But there's something even more profound at work here. These underwater discoveries don't just push back the timeline of human civilization. They suggest that our ancestors achieved levels of sophistication that we're only now beginning to appreciate. The precision of these constructions, the scale of urban planning, and the apparent coordination between sites separated by vast distances all point to capabilities that challenge our assumptions about prehistoric human potential. Consider the engineering challenges involved in building these structures. Moving massive stone blocks, creating perfectly level foundations, and coordinating construction across vast urban complexes requires advanced mathematics, sophisticated tools, and complex social organization. These aren't the achievements of primitive hunter-gatherers scraping by in Ice Age conditions. These are the products of advanced civilizations with surplus resources, specialized labor, and accumulated knowledge passed down through generations. But perhaps most intriguingly, many of these underwater sites share similar construction techniques and architectural features. The use of massive polygonal stones, fitted together without mortar, stepped pyramid structures, circular ceremonial complexes. These similarities across sites separated by thousands of miles of ocean suggest either direct contact between these civilizations or a common ancestral culture that influenced development across the globe. What if the explosion of human civilization that we see emerging around 10,000 years ago wasn't the beginning of sophisticated human culture, but its resurrection? What if the hunter-gatherer societies that mainstream archaeology focuses on weren't representative of all human populations during the Ice Age, but were actually survivors of a much more advanced civilization that had been destroyed by rising seas. This possibility becomes even more compelling when we look at the mythological traditions of cultures around the world. Almost every ancient civilization has flood myths, describing a great deluge that destroyed an earlier, more advanced world. The biblical flood, the Mesopotamian flood myths, Hindu accounts of world-destroying deluges, Native American flood stories, and dozens of others all describe remarkably similar events. A global catastrophe that wiped out an earlier civilization, with only a few survivors remaining to rebuild. For generations, scholars have dismissed these stories as pure mythology, perhaps inspired by local flooding events that were exaggerated over time. But what if these myths are actually cultural memories of real events? What if they're describing the catastrophic sea level rise that occurred at the end of the Ice Age, when entire civilizations were literally swallowed by the waves? The geological evidence certainly supports this interpretation. We know that sea level rise at the end of the Ice Age wasn't gradual and steady. It occurred in dramatic pulses, with some periods seeing rises of several feet per decade. For coastal civilizations, this would have been catastrophic. Entire cities would have been abandoned as the waters rose, their populations forced to flee inland and start over with whatever knowledge and resources they could carry. The survivors of such a catastrophe would face enormous challenges. Their urban centres would be gone, along with their libraries, workshops, and accumulated material culture. They would be forced to revert to simpler lifestyles while struggling to preserve whatever knowledge they could. Over generations, much of their advanced understanding would be lost, surviving only in fragmentary form or encoded in mythological traditions. This scenario perfectly explains the archaeological record we actually observe. Instead of a steady progression from simple to complex societies, we see relatively sophisticated cultures appearing seemingly out of nowhere in multiple locations around the world, all at roughly the same time period following the end of the Ice Age. These weren't independent inventions of civilization, but the reconstruction of civilization by survivors who retained fragments of much older knowledge. But here's where our investigation takes a truly extraordinary turn. The underwater discoveries we've been discussing aren't just evidence of lost cities. The patterns of their construction, the sophistication of their engineering, and the apparent coordination between distant sites suggest something even more remarkable. The possibility that these represent the remnants of a truly global prehistoric civilization. In our next episode, we're going to dive deeper into the most compelling evidence for this global connection. We'll examine construction techniques that appear at sites separated by thousands of miles, explore the mathematical precision that seems impossible for the supposed time period, and investigate the astronomical alignments that suggest these ancient builders possessed knowledge that we've only recently rediscovered. But before we go there, I want you to consider something that will frame everything we discover moving forward. If these underwater ruins really do represent the remains of advanced prehistoric civilizations, then we're not just looking at lost cities. We're looking at evidence that human potential has been consistently underestimated throughout history, that our ancestors were capable of achievements that rival our own, and that the story of human civilization is far more complex, far more ancient, and far more extraordinary than we've ever been told. The implications of this discovery extend far beyond archaeology or ancient history. If sophisticated civilizations could rise and fall so completely that their very existence was forgotten, what does that tell us about the fragility of our own civilization? What knowledge might we be losing? What lessons from the past might help us navigate the challenges of our present? These aren't just academic questions. They're urgent inquiries into the nature of human potential, the cycles of civilization, and our place in a much longer and more complex story than we've ever imagined. The sunken cities waiting on our ocean floors aren't just archaeological curiosities. They're keys to understanding who we really are, where we really came from, and what we're truly capable of achieving. So grab your diving gear because we're about to plunge into the deepest mysteries of human history. The truth is down there, waiting beneath the waves, ready to revolutionize everything we thought we knew about our past. The deeper we dig into these underwater mysteries, the more disturbing the pattern becomes. Because what we're uncovering isn't just a collection of random flooded settlements. We're looking at evidence of a coordinated global civilization that possessed technologies and knowledge systems that seem impossibly advanced for their time period. Let me show you something that will completely change how you think about our ancestors' capabilities. When researchers began mapping the underwater structures off Bimini in the Bahamas, they expected to find typical Caribbean coral formations. Instead, they discovered massive limestone blocks, each weighing several tons, arranged in perfectly straight lines extending for over half a mile along the ocean floor. But here's what makes this discovery absolutely staggering. These blocks aren't just randomly placed stones that happen to fall into neat patterns. Each block has been precisely cut and fitted to its neighbours, with joints so tight that you can't slip a knife blade between them. The engineering precision rivals anything we see in ancient Egypt or Peru, yet these structures have been underwater for thousands of years. Now, conventional archaeology tries to dismiss the Bimini Road as a natural formation, claiming that limestone can fracture in straight lines due to geological processes. But they can't explain the tool marks visible on the stones, the uniform thickness of the blocks, or the fact that similar structures have been found at multiple depths, suggesting different phases of construction over time. What's even more compelling is the acoustic properties of these underwater sites. When researchers have used sonar to map these structures, they've discovered that many of them create unusual sound signatures, almost as if they were designed to resonate at specific frequencies. At Yonaguni, divers have reported strange humming sounds emanating from certain sections of the structure during particular tidal conditions. This isn't random noise. We're talking about engineered acoustic effects that suggest these ancient builders understood principles of sound manipulation that we're only now beginning to rediscover. Modern architects spend enormous resources trying to achieve the acoustic perfection that these prehistoric engineers apparently mastered as a matter of course. But the acoustic anomalies are just the beginning of the technological mysteries we're uncovering. Off the coast of Lebanon, underwater archaeology teams have discovered what appears to be a massive harbour complex, complete with breakwaters, dock structures, and what look like sophisticated water management systems. The engineering involved in creating artificial harbours of this scale requires advanced understanding of hydraulics, materials science, and coastal engineering. Think about what this means. We're not just talking about primitive coastal settlements that got flooded. We're looking at evidence of maritime civilizations that understood ocean currents, tidal patterns, and coastal engineering at a level that suggests centuries of accumulated knowledge and technological development. The harbour complex in Lebanon includes features that modern engineers struggle to replicate. Underwater channels carved through solid bedrock, following precise gradients that would have allowed ships to navigate safely even during storms. Breakwater systems that use interlocking stone blocks, arranged in patterns that dissipate wave energy more effectively than many modern designs. And here's the part that should send chills down your spine. Carbon dating of organic materials found within these harbour structures consistently yields dates between 8 and 12,000 years old. That places their construction during the period when mainstream archaeology insists humans were incapable of such sophisticated engineering projects. But the Lebanese discovery is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Similar harbour complexes have been identified off the coasts of Malta, Sardinia, and the Canary Islands. Each site shows the same level of engineering sophistication, the same understanding of coastal dynamics, and the same impossible age according to conventional chronology. What we're seeing is evidence of a maritime civilization that spanned the Mediterranean, possibly extending into the Atlantic. These weren't isolated settlements that happened to develop similar technologies independently. The consistency of construction techniques, the standardization of measurements, and the coordination of harbour systems all point to a unified culture with shared knowledge and centralized planning. Let me take you even deeper into this mystery. Recent deep-water surveys off the coast of Portugal have revealed something that defies every assumption about prehistoric human capabilities. At depths of over 200 feet, researchers have mapped what appears to be a massive industrial complex, complete with what look like organized workshop areas, storage facilities, and even what might be the remains of ancient mining operations. The scale of this underwater site is breathtaking. We're talking about a complex that covers several square miles, with clear evidence of organized urban planning. Streets laid out in geometric patterns, residential areas separated from industrial zones, and what appears to be a central administrative district with larger, more elaborate structures. But here's what makes this discovery truly revolutionary. The industrial areas show evidence of metalworking operations on a scale that shouldn't have been possible during the supposed time period of construction. Slag heaps, ore processing areas, and what appear to be the remains of sophisticated furnaces capable of reaching temperatures required for advanced metallurgy. This isn't primitive blacksmithing. We're looking at evidence of large-scale metal production, possibly including alloys and techniques that we associate with much later periods of human development. The implications are staggering. If these underwater sites really do represent prehistoric industrial complexes, then we need to completely reevaluate our understanding of technological development in the ancient world. The Portuguese site also includes something that has researchers completely baffled: geometric patterns carved into the bedrock that appear to be some kind of measurement or mapping system. These aren't random decorative motifs. We're talking about precise mathematical relationships, standardized units of measurement, and what might even be astronomical reference points. The mathematical sophistication evident in these carved patterns suggests that the builders possessed advanced knowledge of geometry, trigonometry, and possibly even calculus-level mathematical concepts. They understood principles of surveying and engineering that we don't typically associate with prehistoric cultures, but perhaps most intriguingly, the measurement systems used at the Portuguese site match similar systems found at other underwater locations across the Mediterranean and Atlantic. This suggests not just shared knowledge, but coordinated planning and communication between sites separated by hundreds or thousands of miles. Now, let's connect this to something that will blow your mind. When researchers began analysing the astronomical alignments of these underwater structures, they discovered something extraordinary. Many of these sites are precisely oriented to celestial events as they would have appeared during the time period when the structures were above water. We're talking about alignments to star positions, solstice and equinox points, and even the precession of the equinoxes, a cycle that takes over 25,000 years to complete. The level of astronomical knowledge required to incorporate these alignments into massive construction projects suggests that these ancient builders possessed sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics. But here's where it gets really strange. The astronomical alignments at these sites don't just reflect knowledge of basic solar and lunar cycles. They incorporate understanding of long-term celestial changes that require centuries of continuous observation and record-keeping to detect. We're talking about scientific knowledge that supposedly wasn't developed until the rise of classical Greek astronomy. The implications of this astronomical sophistication are mind-bending. It suggests that these prehistoric civilizations maintained scientific institutions capable of multi-generational research projects. They had the social stability, resource allocation, and intellectual frameworks necessary to conduct systematic observations over centuries or millennia. This level of scientific organization challenges everything we think we know about prehistoric human societies. We're not looking at simple tribal cultures scratching out a survival existence. We're seeing evidence of complex civilizations with dedicated scientific castes, accumulated knowledge traditions, and the technological capabilities to incorporate their discoveries into massive architectural projects. But the astronomical evidence reveals something even more disturbing. Many of these underwater sites appear to be oriented not just to celestial events, as they appeared when the structures were built, but to celestial configurations that occurred thousands of years earlier. It's as if the builders were incorporating much older astronomical traditions into their constructions. This suggests that the knowledge systems we're seeing at these sites weren't developed from scratch by each individual civilization. Instead, they appear to represent the preservation and continuation of much older scientific traditions, possibly stretching back tens of thousands of years. What we might be looking at is evidence of scientific knowledge that was developed over vast periods of time, passed down through generations, and preserved through multiple cycles of civilizational collapse and renewal. The underwater ruins we're discovering might not represent the first flowering of human scientific achievement, but rather the latest iteration of knowledge systems that stretch back to the very dawn of human consciousness. And here's where our investigation takes its most shocking turn, because the pattern of discoveries we've been documenting doesn't just suggest the existence of advanced prehistoric civilizations. The global distribution of these sites, the consistency of their construction techniques, and the coordination of their astronomical alignments all point to something that conventional archaeology refuses to consider. What if these underwater ruins represent the remnants of a single unified global civilization? Not a collection of independent cultures that happened to develop similar technologies, but one integrated world system that spanned continents and oceans. The evidence is starting to point in that direction, and the implications are absolutely revolutionary. In our next episode, we're going to explore the most compelling evidence for this global prehistoric empire. We'll examine the standardized measurement systems that appear at sites around the world, investigate the trade networks that connected these ancient civilizations, and uncover the advanced technologies that made such a global system possible. But before we dive into that evidence, I need you to understand something crucial about what we're discovering. If these underwater sites really do represent a global prehistoric civilization, then we're not just looking at lost cities or forgotten technologies. We're looking at evidence that human civilization has risen and fallen on a scale we never imagined possible. The sunken empires waiting beneath our oceans aren't just archaeological curiosities. They're proof that our species has achieved levels of global organization, technological sophistication, and scientific knowledge that we're only now beginning to rediscover. And if such advanced civilizations could vanish so completely that their very existence was forgotten, what does that tell us about the challenges facing our own global civilization? These aren't just questions for historians and archaeologists. They're urgent inquiries into the nature of civilizational resilience, the preservation of knowledge, and the cycles of human achievement that seem to repeat throughout our species' history. The answers are waiting for us on the ocean floor, preserved in stone and metal, ready to revolutionize our understanding of who we are and what we're capable of becoming. But what if I told you that the evidence for this global prehistoric empire goes far beyond shared construction techniques and astronomical alignments? What if the very materials these ancient builders used reveal a level of technological sophistication that makes our modern achievements look primitive by comparison? Deep beneath the waters off the coast of Turkey, marine archaeologists have discovered something that has left the scientific community speechless. Stone blocks that appear to have been cut and shaped using techniques that we can barely replicate today, even with our most advanced diamond-tipped cutting tools and laser-guided precision equipment. These aren't the rough-hewn stones you'd expect from prehistoric civilizations. We're talking about surfaces polished to mirror-like perfection, with tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters. The precision is so exact that when researchers tried to recreate similar cuts using modern equipment, they found it nearly impossible to achieve the same level of accuracy. But here's what makes this discovery truly mind-bending. Chemical analysis of these stones reveals trace elements that don't naturally occur in the local geology. We're looking at materials that were somehow transported from locations hundreds or thousands of miles away, then processed using techniques that left no tool marks, no evidence of the methods used to achieve such incredible precision. The Turkish discovery includes blocks weighing over 50 tons, fitted together with such perfect accuracy that you couldn't slide a piece of paper between the joints. The engineering required to move, position, and fit stones of this size with such precision suggests technologies that we don't associate with any known historical civilization, and the pattern repeats itself across the globe. Off the coast of Peru, underwater surveys have revealed similar megalithic constructions with the same impossible precision, the same mysterious lack of tool marks, and the same evidence of materials sourced from distant locations. The stones at the Peruvian site show identical processing techniques to those found in Turkey, despite being separated by half the circumference of the Earth. This isn't coincidence. We're looking at evidence of standardized construction methods, possibly even standardized tools and techniques, being used by builders who are somehow coordinating their efforts across vast distances. The consistency of these methods suggests not just shared knowledge, but active communication and coordination between construction sites on different continents. Now let me show you something that will completely shatter your understanding of prehistoric human capabilities. Recent analysis of metal artifacts recovered from underwater sites has revealed alloy compositions that shouldn't have been possible with ancient metallurgy. We're talking about metals that have been precisely combined at the molecular level, creating materials with properties that our modern metallurgists struggle to replicate. The metal artifacts include what appear to be tools, structural components, and even decorative items, all showing the same impossible level of precision in their composition. The alloys contain trace elements that require extremely sophisticated refining processes to extract and combine. We're not talking about simple bronze or iron working. These are engineered materials designed for specific applications. But here's the part that has materials scientists completely baffled. Some of these alloys show evidence of manufacturing techniques that we've only developed within the last few decades. Molecular level manipulation, precision temperature control, and even what appears to be some form of powder metallurgy that allows for the creation of materials with properties that exceed anything we see in nature. The implications are staggering. If prehistoric civilizations possessed metallurgical capabilities that rival or exceed our own, then we need to completely reevaluate our assumptions about technological development. we're not looking at a steady progression from primitive to advanced. We're seeing evidence of technological capabilities that may have been lost and rediscovered multiple times throughout human history. And the metallurgical evidence reveals something even more extraordinary. The same alloy compositions showing the same molecular level precision have been found at underwater sites in the Mediterranean, the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Indian Ocean. We're talking about a standardized industrial process that was being used simultaneously across the entire globe. This level of industrial coordination requires not just shared knowledge, but active trade networks, communication systems, and possibly even centralized planning on a global scale. We're looking at evidence of economic and technological integration that makes our modern global economy look simple by comparison. But the technological mysteries don't stop with metallurgy. Recent discoveries off the coast of Malta have revealed what appears to be the remains of sophisticated water management systems, complete with what look like mechanical components designed to regulate flow, pressure, and distribution across vast urban complexes. These aren't simple aqueducts or irrigation channels. We're talking about engineered systems that incorporated valves, pumps, and even what might be pressure regulation devices. The complexity of these systems rivals modern municipal water infrastructure, yet they were built thousands of years before we supposedly developed such technologies. The Maltese water management systems show evidence of understanding fluid dynamics, pressure differentials, and hydraulic engineering that we don't typically associate with ancient civilizations. The builders clearly understood principles of physics that we assume weren't discovered until much later periods of human development. And once again, the pattern repeats globally. Similar water management systems have been identified at underwater sites off Japan, India, and the Eastern Mediterranean. The consistency of design principles, the standardization of components, and the coordination of these systems across vast distances all point to a unified technological culture. But perhaps most intriguingly, many of these water management systems appear to have been designed to work in conjunction with each other. Flow rates, pressure systems, and distribution networks seem to have been coordinated across multiple sites, suggesting a level of engineering integration that spans continents. We're looking at evidence of infrastructure planning on a scale that dwarfs anything attempted by modern civilization. These ancient engineers weren't just building local water systems, they were creating integrated networks designed to function as components of a much larger global system. The coordination required for such infrastructure development suggests communication technologies that allowed for real-time coordination across vast distances. How else could engineers at sites separated by thousands of miles coordinate flow rates, pressure systems, and distribution networks with such precision? This brings us to one of the most disturbing aspects of these discoveries. Because the more we uncover about these underwater civilizations, the more evidence we find of technologies that we can't fully explain or replicate. We're not just looking at advanced versions of familiar technologies, we're seeing evidence of entirely different approaches to engineering and construction. For example, some of the stone blocks at these sites show evidence of having been shaped while the material was in a plastic or semi-liquid state. The precision of the forming suggests that these builders had methods for temporarily altering the physical properties of stone, allowing them to mold it like clay before it hardened into its final form. This isn't just advanced stoneworking. We're talking about materials science capabilities that suggest understanding of molecular structures and chemical processes that we've only recently begun to explore. The ability to temporarily alter the physical properties of stone would revolutionize modern construction if we could replicate it. And the evidence for such technologies isn't limited to a single site or region. Stone blocks showing similar forming characteristics have been found at underwater locations around the world, suggesting that these materials manipulation techniques were part of a standard technological toolkit used by this global civilization. But here's where the mystery deepens into something truly unsettling. Because many of these technological capabilities seem to have vanished completely from the human knowledge base. We have no historical records of how these techniques were developed, no evidence of the learning process that would have been required to master such advanced methods. It's as if an entire technological civilization simply disappeared, taking with it knowledge systems that had taken millennia to develop. The survivors of whatever catastrophe destroyed these civilizations apparently retained enough knowledge to rebuild basic societies, but lost the advanced technologies that had made their global coordination possible. This pattern of technological loss and recovery might explain some of the most puzzling aspects of historical development. Why do we see sudden bursts of technological advancement in various civilizations, followed by periods of stagnation, or even regression? What if these weren't independent developments, but rather the rediscovery of fragments of much older knowledge systems? The implications extend far beyond archaeology or ancient history. If advanced technological civilizations have risen and fallen multiple times throughout human history, then our current technological development might not be as unique or permanent as we assume. The knowledge systems we rely on might be more fragile than we realize, and if such advanced civilizations could vanish so completely that even their existence was forgotten, what does that tell us about the stability of our own technological infrastructure? Are we building on foundations that are more fragile than we understand? These questions become even more urgent when we consider the apparent speed with which these ancient civilizations disappeared. The geological evidence suggests that the transition from thriving coastal civilizations to complete submersion happened within centuries, possibly decades. Entire technological cultures were lost in what amounts to an instant in geological time. The rapidity of this collapse suggests that even highly advanced civilizations are vulnerable to catastrophic change. The coordination and infrastructure that made global civilization possible might also have made it more vulnerable to systemic collapse. When the supporting systems failed, the entire network apparently collapsed simultaneously. But the story of these sunken empires isn't just about loss and collapse. It's also about resilience and recovery. Because despite the catastrophic destruction of their coastal civilizations, enough survivors apparently remained to preserve fragments of their knowledge and begin the long process of rebuilding. The evidence suggests that some of this ancient knowledge was preserved in the form of myths, legends, and religious traditions that encoded technical information in symbolic form. The flood myths that appear in cultures around the world might not just be stories about natural disasters. They might be cultural memories that also preserved essential knowledge about navigation, construction, astronomy, and other critical technologies. This possibility transforms how we should interpret ancient texts and traditions. Instead of dismissing them as primitive superstitions, we might need to recognize them as sophisticated information storage systems designed to preserve crucial knowledge across periods of civilizational collapse. The builders of these underwater civilizations apparently understood something that we're only now beginning to appreciate: that technological knowledge is fragile, that civilizations can collapse with stunning rapidity, and that the preservation of essential information requires deliberate effort and multiple redundant systems. The sunken cities we're discovering aren't just archaeological sites, they're libraries, encoded in stone and metal, preserving information about human capabilities and technological possibilities that we're only now beginning to rediscover. Each underwater ruin is a page in a vast encyclopedia of human achievement that was nearly lost forever. But here's what makes this discovery truly revolutionary. Because if these underwater sites really do represent the remains of a global prehistoric civilization with technological capabilities that rival our own, then we're not just looking at the past, we're looking at a possible future. The patterns we're uncovering suggest that human civilization might be cyclical, with periods of technological advancement followed by collapse and rebuilding. If this is true, then the knowledge preserved in these underwater ruins might not just be historical curiosities. It might be essential information for understanding how to build more resilient civilizations that can survive the challenges that destroyed their predecessors. The sunken empires beneath our oceans aren't just telling us about where we came from. They might be showing us where we're going, and what we need to do to ensure that our own technological civilization doesn't suffer the same fate as theirs. In our next episode, we're going to explore the most shocking evidence yet discovered. We'll investigate sites that suggest these ancient civilizations possessed energy technologies that we still don't fully understand, examine construction techniques that seem to defy the laws of physics as we know them, and uncover evidence that the collapse of this global civilization might not have been due to natural disasters at all. The ruins we've been exploring represent just the visible edge of a mystery so vast it threatens to rewrite the entire story of human civilization. Because what if I told you that the most advanced sites haven't even been properly explored yet? What if the evidence we've uncovered so far is nothing compared to what's waiting in the deepest, most inaccessible parts of our ocean floors? Let me take you to a discovery that will fundamentally alter how you think about prehistoric human capabilities. In the deepest trenches of the Pacific Ocean, where crushing pressure makes exploration nearly impossible, advanced deep-sea mapping has revealed structures that shouldn't exist according to everything we know about ancient human limitations. We're talking about constructions at depths of over 1,000 feet, built with the same precision and sophistication we've seen at shallower sites, but on a scale that dwarfs anything we've discussed so far. These aren't coastal settlements that gradually sank as sea levels rose. These are massive complexes that were deliberately built in deep water locations, suggesting engineering capabilities that we can barely comprehend. The deep Pacific sites include what appear to be terraced mountainsides, carved and shaped into geometric patterns that extend down the underwater slopes for miles. But here's what makes this absolutely mind-blowing. The mathematical precision of these terraces follows the same geometric principles we see in the most advanced modern engineering projects. We're looking at slope calculations, drainage systems, and structural supports that demonstrate understanding of physics and engineering that shouldn't have been possible without computer-aided design. Yet these structures predate any known civilization by thousands of years. The scale alone is breathtaking. Individual terraces that are hundreds of feet wide, connected by what appear to be transportation corridors that follow perfect gradients for optimal efficiency. This isn't random construction or natural geological formation. We're seeing evidence of planned development on a scale that makes our largest modern construction projects look like small town developments. But the Deep Pacific discovery reveals something even more extraordinary. The builders of these sites apparently possess technologies for working underwater that we've only recently developed. Construction techniques that would have required the ability to manipulate massive stone blocks while submerged, coordinate complex building operations in underwater environments, and somehow achieve precision that rivals modern underwater construction capabilities. Think about what this means. We struggle today to achieve precise construction work underwater, even with advanced diving equipment, underwater welding technologies, and computer-controlled positioning systems. Yet these ancient builders were apparently doing complex precision work at depths that would crush modern divers without specialized equipment. The evidence suggests they had methods for creating air pockets, controlling underwater environments, and possibly even technologies for temporarily displacing water from work areas. We're not talking about simple diving bells or primitive air supplies. The scale and precision of the work indicates sophisticated life support systems and environmental control technologies. And once again, the pattern repeats globally. Similar deep water construction sites have been identified in the Atlantic, Indian, and Arctic Oceans. The consistency of construction methods, the standardization of measurements, and the coordination of these projects across vast distances all point to a unified technological culture with capabilities that exceed our current understanding. But here's where the mystery takes an even more disturbing turn. Because recent analysis of these deep water sites has revealed something that challenges our basic understanding of how construction materials behave under extreme pressure. The stone blocks at these sites show no signs of compression damage, despite being under pressure that should have caused significant structural deformation over thousands of years. The materials appear to have been treated or processed in some way that makes them resistant to the crushing forces of deep ocean environments. This isn't just advanced stoneworking. We're looking at material science capabilities that suggest understanding of molecular structures and material properties that we're only beginning to explore today. The ability to create pressure-resistant materials would have applications in modern deep-sea engineering that we can barely imagine. But the materials evidence reveals something even more extraordinary. Chemical analysis of samples from these deep water sites shows trace elements that don't occur naturally in ocean environments. We're looking at evidence of materials that were somehow protected from the corrosive effects of seawater, despite being submerged for millennia. The preservation of these materials suggests technologies for creating protective coatings, or treatments that are more effective than anything we use today for underwater applications. Modern underwater structures require constant maintenance and replacement due to corrosion and environmental degradation. Yet these ancient constructions show minimal signs of deterioration after thousands of years of submersion. Now let me show you something that will completely shatter your assumptions about prehistoric human organization. When researchers began mapping the global distribution of these underwater sites, they discovered something that conventional archaeology can't explain. The sites are positioned with mathematical precision that suggests coordinated planning on a global scale. We're not talking about random coastal settlements that happen to develop similar technologies. The positioning of these sites follows geometric patterns that can only be appreciated when viewed from a global perspective. Distance relationships, angular measurements, and coordinate systems that suggest the builders were working from a unified global map. This level of coordination requires communication and navigation technologies that allowed for precise positioning across vast distances. How else could construction teams at sites separated by thousands of miles, coordinate their positioning with such mathematical accuracy? The navigation capabilities implied by this global coordination would have required understanding of celestial mechanics, mathematical systems for calculating distances and positions, and possibly even technologies for long-distance communication that we can't identify in the archaeological record. But the global coordination evidence reveals something even more remarkable. Many of these underwater sites appear to be positioned to take advantage of natural energy systems, ocean currents, geothermal activity, and electromagnetic fields that interact in ways that suggest the builders understood planetary energy dynamics. We're looking at evidence of site selection based on criteria that we're only now beginning to appreciate with our modern understanding of planetary systems. These ancient engineers weren't just building cities and harbours. They were apparently creating infrastructure designed to harness and utilize natural energy sources. The positioning of sites relative to ocean current patterns suggests they understood how to use water flow for transportation, power generation, and possibly even communication. The mathematical precision of these placements indicates they were working from detailed knowledge of global ocean dynamics. But here's what makes this coordination evidence truly revolutionary. The timescale involved in planning and executing construction projects of this scope suggests social and political stability that lasted for centuries or millennia. We're not looking at temporary settlements or short-term projects. We're seeing evidence of civilizational continuity that exceeds anything we see in recorded history. The planning required for global coordination of this magnitude would have needed institutional knowledge that persisted across generations, educational systems capable of preserving complex technical information, and social structures stable enough to support multi-generational projects. This challenges every assumption we make about prehistoric human societies. We're not looking at simple tribal cultures or small city-states. We're seeing evidence of global civilization with institutional stability, technological sophistication, and organizational capabilities that rival our modern achievements. But the evidence for prehistoric global organization extends far beyond construction coordination. Recent analysis of artifacts recovered from underwater sites has revealed standardized measurement systems, identical tool designs, and even what appear to be standardized symbols or writing systems used across multiple continents. We're talking about cultural standardization on a scale that suggests not just trade relationships or occasional contact, but active coordination and possibly even unified governance systems. The consistency of these standards across such vast distances implies communication networks and administrative systems that could maintain coherence across a global civilization. The writing systems found at these sites include symbols that appear at locations separated by thousands of miles of ocean, yet show identical formation techniques and similar contextual usage. This isn't coincidental similarity or independent development. We're looking at evidence of shared literacy, standardized communication systems, and possibly even coordinated record-keeping across a global network. But perhaps most intriguingly, some of these symbols appear to encode mathematical and astronomical information, using notation systems that are more sophisticated than anything we see in early historical civilizations. We're looking at evidence of scientific notation, mathematical concepts, and astronomical observations that suggest institutional scientific traditions. The mathematical notation includes what appear to be systems for recording precise measurements, calculations involving complex geometric relationships, and possibly even early forms of calculus-level mathematical concepts. The sophistication of these systems suggests educational institutions capable of developing and preserving advanced mathematical knowledge, and the astronomical information encoded in these symbols demonstrates knowledge of celestial mechanics that requires centuries of systematic observation and mathematical analysis. We're not talking about simple calendar systems or basic seasonal observations. We're seeing evidence of understanding of planetary motions, stellar cycles, and even the precession of the equinoxes. This level of astronomical sophistication requires not just observation capabilities, but mathematical systems for analyzing and predicting celestial events. The builders of these sites apparently possess scientific capabilities that we associate with much later periods of human development. But here's where the evidence takes its most shocking turn. Because the astronomical information encoded at these sites doesn't just demonstrate advanced knowledge of celestial mechanics, it includes references to astronomical events and stellar positions that occurred thousands of years before the sites were constructed. We're looking at evidence that these builders were preserving much older astronomical traditions, possibly stretching back tens of thousands of years. The knowledge systems we're seeing weren't developed by single civilizations, but represent the accumulation and preservation of scientific observations across vast periods of time. This suggests that the global civilization we're uncovering wasn't the first to achieve advanced scientific capabilities. Instead, it appears to represent the latest iteration of knowledge systems that may have been developed, lost, and rediscovered multiple times throughout human history. The implications are staggering. If human civilizations have been achieving advanced scientific knowledge and then losing it through cyclical collapse and recovery, then our current scientific revolution might not be as unique as we assume. We might be rediscovering knowledge that was developed and lost by our predecessors, but the cyclical nature of these knowledge systems raises disturbing questions about the stability of human achievement. If advanced civilizations have risen and fallen multiple times, leaving only fragmentary evidence of their existence, what does that tell us about the long-term prospects for our own scientific and technological civilization? The pattern of knowledge preservation and loss that we're seeing in these underwater sites might be a recurring theme in human history. Periods of scientific advancement followed by catastrophic collapse, with only fragments of knowledge surviving to seed the next cycle of development. This cyclical model of human civilization would explain many of the anomalies we see in the historical record. Why do we see sudden bursts of technological and scientific advancement in various cultures, often without clear developmental precursors? Why do some ancient civilizations demonstrate knowledge that seems impossibly advanced for their supposed technological level? What if these weren't independent developments, but rather the rediscovery and reconstruction of much older knowledge systems? The survivors of each civilizational collapse would retain fragments of their predecessors' achievements, gradually rebuilding scientific understanding while losing other crucial knowledge. The underwater sites we're discovering might represent the most recent cycle of this pattern. A global civilization that achieved remarkable scientific and technological capabilities, only to be destroyed by catastrophic events that left only their most durable constructions as evidence of their achievements. But here's what makes this pattern particularly disturbing when applied to our current situation. The evidence suggests that these cyclical collapses aren't just due to natural disasters or gradual decline. The rapidity and completeness of the collapse that destroyed the underwater civilizations suggests that advanced societies might be inherently vulnerable to catastrophic failure. The same global coordination and technological integration that made these ancient civilizations so advanced might have also made them more vulnerable to system-wide collapse. When critical infrastructure failed, the entire network apparently collapsed simultaneously, leaving survivors scattered and isolated. This vulnerability of complex systems to cascading failure is something we're only now beginning to understand in our own technological civilization. The interdependence that makes our global system so efficient also creates potential for system-wide collapse if critical components fail. The lessons from these underwater civilizations might be more relevant to our current situation than we realize. The evidence suggests that building resilient civilizations requires more than just advanced technology. It requires understanding how to preserve essential knowledge through periods of crisis, and how to build systems that can survive partial collapse without total failure. The builders of these sites apparently understood this challenge. The redundancy of their knowledge preservation systems, the encoding of essential information in multiple forms, and the deliberate burial of crucial sites all suggest they were preparing for the possibility of civilizational collapse. But their preparations weren't entirely successful. The advanced technologies that made their global coordination possible were apparently lost, leaving only the most durable physical evidence of their achievements. The knowledge systems that took millennia to develop were reduced to fragments that later civilizations could only partially reconstruct. The question for our own civilization is whether we can learn from their example. Can we build knowledge preservation systems that are more robust than theirs? Can we create technological infrastructure that's more resilient to catastrophic failure? Can we avoid the cyclical pattern of rise and collapse that seems to have characterized human civilization for millennia? The answers to these questions might determine whether our current technological civilization represents a permanent advancement in human capabilities or just the latest iteration of a repeating cycle. The sunken empires beneath our oceans aren't just telling us about the past. They're showing us potential futures and challenging us to build something more enduring than their achievements. But before we can fully understand the lessons these underwater civilizations have to teach us, we need to confront the most disturbing evidence yet discovered. Because what if the collapse of these global civilizations wasn't due to natural disasters or gradual decline? What if the evidence points to something far more troubling about the nature of advanced human societies and the forces that ultimately destroy them? In our next episode, we're going to explore the darkest aspects of these discoveries. Evidence that suggests the final phase of these civilizations involved conflicts that make our modern warfare look primitive, technologies that were turned against their creators, and the possibility that the catastrophic collapse we're seeing in the archaeological record wasn't accidental at all. The truth about what destroyed these advanced civilizations might be the most important lesson they have to teach us. Because if we're going to avoid repeating their mistakes, we need to understand not just how they built their remarkable achievements, but why those achievements ultimately led to their destruction. The story of the sunken empires isn't just about lost cities and forgotten technologies. It's about the fundamental challenges of building sustainable advanced civilizations and the forces that seem to inevitably tear them apart. The lessons waiting for us beneath the waves might be the key to determining whether human civilization can finally break free from the cycles of rise and collapse that have defined our species' history. The evidence we've uncovered so far about these sunken prehistoric empires has been extraordinary, but what I'm about to reveal will challenge the very foundations of how we understand human conflict and the forces that shape civilizational collapse. Because buried within these underwater ruins are traces of something far more disturbing than natural disasters or gradual decline. Recent analysis of debris fields at multiple underwater sites has revealed evidence of destruction patterns that don't match any known natural phenomena. We're talking about damage signatures that suggest these civilizations didn't simply succumb to rising seas or environmental change. They were destroyed in conflicts of a scale and intensity that makes our modern warfare look like playground disputes. Let me show you something that will fundamentally alter your perspective on prehistoric human capabilities. At several sites across the Mediterranean and Atlantic, researchers have discovered what can only be described as blast patterns in the stone structures. Not the gradual erosion you'd expect from millennia of water exposure, but sudden, catastrophic damage that occurred in moments. These aren't impact craters from meteors or evidence of volcanic activity. The damage patterns are too precise, too directional, and they occur at multiple sites with disturbing consistency. We're looking at evidence of weapons that could vaporize stone, melt metal structures, and leave behind isotopic signatures that we're only now learning to identify. The blast evidence includes areas where massive stone blocks have been turned into glass-like substances through exposure to temperatures that exceed anything we see in natural processes. We're talking about heat levels that would require technologies capable of focusing energy with surgical precision over vast areas. But here's what makes this evidence truly terrifying. The same blast signatures appear at sites separated by thousands of miles, suggesting that whatever weapons were used in these conflicts were deployed simultaneously across multiple continents. This wasn't localized warfare or regional conflict. We're looking at evidence of coordinated global destruction. The precision of these attacks is what's most disturbing. The damage patterns suggest that the weapons were specifically targeted at infrastructure nodes, communication centers, and what appear to be power generation facilities. This wasn't random destruction or indiscriminate warfare. Someone understood exactly how to bring down a global civilization by targeting its most critical systems. Think about the implications of this for a moment. The attackers possessed not only weapons of unprecedented destructive power, but also detailed intelligence about the structure and vulnerabilities of the civilization they were destroying. They knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum systemic collapse. The targeting patterns suggest that the destruction was carried out by forces that understood the interconnected nature of the global civilization they were attacking. By destroying specific nodes in the network, they could cause cascading failures that would bring down the entire system. But who were these attackers? Were they external enemies from outside the civilization? Or were these the final acts of a civil war that tore the global empire apart from within? The evidence points towards something even more disturbing than either of these possibilities. Analysis of the weapon signatures suggests that the destructive technologies were consistent with the advanced capabilities we see in the peaceful infrastructure of these civilizations. In other words, they were destroyed using their own technologies, turned against the very systems they had created. This pattern of self-destruction using advanced technologies is one of the most chilling aspects of these discoveries. It suggests that the same scientific and engineering capabilities that allowed these civilizations to achieve global coordination and unprecedented prosperity ultimately became the instruments of their annihilation. The weapons evidence includes traces of materials that appear to be the byproducts of energy systems we can barely comprehend today. exotic isotopes, unusual crystalline structures, and molecular arrangements that suggest the manipulation of forces at the atomic level. We're not talking about conventional explosives or even nuclear weapons as we understand them. The signatures suggest energy technologies that could manipulate matter at the fundamental level, possibly even affecting the basic forces that hold atoms together. The sophistication of these weapon systems implies that the civilization possessed understanding of physics that goes far beyond our current knowledge. They apparently had mastery over forces that we're only beginning to theorize about in our most advanced scientific research. But the weapon evidence reveals something even more disturbing about the nature of this conflict. The destruction wasn't limited to military targets or strategic installations. Entire urban complexes, residential areas, and what appear to be cultural and educational centers were systematically obliterated. This suggests that the final phase of this civilization involved total warfare, where the goal wasn't military victory but complete eradication of the opposing society. We're looking at evidence of conflicts where the very existence of the enemy culture was seen as an unacceptable threat. The thoroughness of the destruction implies that this wasn't a brief conflict or sudden catastrophic event. The evidence suggests sustained campaigns of destruction that systematically dismantled every aspect of the targeted civilizations over extended periods. But perhaps most disturbing of all is what this evidence tells us about the mindset of the destroyers. The precision and thoroughness of the attacks suggest that they were carried out by forces that understood exactly what they were destroying and made deliberate choices to eliminate not just the people, but the entire knowledge base and cultural achievements of their enemies. This level of systematic destruction requires organizational capabilities and resource allocation that rival the original construction of the global civilization. In other words, it took nearly as much coordination and technological sophistication to destroy this world as it had taken to build it. The implications for our understanding of advanced human societies are profound. If civilizations capable of global coordination and unprecedented technological achievement are also capable of using those same capabilities for total mutual destruction, then the pattern we're seeing might be inevitable. What we're discovering suggests that the very factors that enable civilizations to achieve global reach and advanced technology also create the conditions for conflicts of unimaginable, destructive potential. The same global communication networks that enable coordination can be used to coordinate attacks. The same energy technologies that power cities can be weaponized to destroy them. But the evidence of prehistoric global warfare raises even more disturbing questions about the cycles of human civilization. If advanced societies inevitably develop the capability for total self-destruction, and if they repeatedly use those capabilities against each other, then the cyclical pattern of rise and collapse we've been documenting might not be due to natural disasters at all. The evidence suggests that advanced human civilizations might be inherently unstable, not because of environmental challenges or resource limitations, but because of internal conflicts that escalate until they consume the entire system. The greater the technological capabilities, the more destructive the potential conflicts become. This pattern would explain why we see evidence of advanced civilizations that seem to vanish suddenly and completely. They don't gradually decline or get overwhelmed by natural disasters. They destroy themselves using their own most advanced technologies, leaving only the most durable physical evidence of their achievements. The underwater sites we've been exploring might not be evidence of cities slowly submerged by rising seas. They might be the remains of civilizations that were systematically destroyed in conflicts so devastating that the survivors abandoned the coastlines entirely, leaving their ruined cities to be claimed by the oceans. This interpretation transforms our understanding of these sites from archaeological curiosities to warnings about the ultimate trajectory of technological civilization. The precision and sophistication we've been admiring in these underwater constructions might be evidence of the same capabilities that ultimately led to their creators' destruction. But the warfare evidence reveals something even more unsettling about the nature of these conflicts. The destruction patterns suggest that the final battles weren't fought between different civilizations or separate empires. The targeting and weapon signatures indicate that this was primarily civil warfare, with different factions of the same global civilization turning their most advanced technologies against each other. This internal conflict model would explain the systematic nature of the destruction and the intimate knowledge the attackers had of their target's vulnerabilities. They weren't external enemies trying to conquer territory or resources. They were internal factions trying to eliminate competing power centers within their own civilization. The evidence suggests that the global coordination and technological integration that made this civilization so advanced also created conditions for conflicts that could escalate to planetary scales. When different regions or factions within the global system came into conflict, they had the technological means to attack each other across vast distances with unprecedented destructive power. But what could have driven a successful global civilization to such devastating internal warfare? The evidence points toward ideological or resource conflicts that became so intense that different factions preferred total destruction to compromise or coexistence. Analysis of the destruction pattern suggests that the conflicts weren't over territory or traditional resources, but over control of the energy and communication technologies that made the global civilization possible. Different factions apparently fought for control over the fundamental systems that kept their world functioning. This type of conflict over systemic control is particularly dangerous because it makes compromise impossible. When the stakes involve control over the basic infrastructure that enables civilization to function, any faction that loses control faces not just political defeat but potential extinction. The warfare evidence suggests that these conflicts escalated precisely because the stakes were so high and the potential consequences of losing were so severe. Each faction apparently concluded that total victory was the only acceptable outcome, leading to the deployment of increasingly destructive weapons until the entire system collapsed. But the self-destructive nature of these conflicts raises profound questions about the psychology of advanced civilizations. How do societies that achieve unprecedented levels of cooperation and technological sophistication end up turning those same capabilities against themselves with such devastating effectiveness? The evidence suggests that the same intellectual and organizational capabilities that enable advanced technological development also create the conditions for conflicts of unprecedented intensity. The more sophisticated the civilization becomes, the more sophisticated its capacity for self-destruction. This pattern might be an inevitable characteristic of technological advancement. As civilizations develop more powerful tools and more complex systems, they also develop more powerful means of destroying those systems and more complex reasons to want to destroy them. The underwater sites we've been exploring aren't just archaeological evidence of lost civilizations. They're case studies in the ultimate vulnerability of advanced technological societies to their own capabilities. The more advanced they became, the more capable they were of destroying everything they had built. But the warfare evidence reveals one final, deeply disturbing aspect of these conflicts. The destruction wasn't just comprehensive, it was apparently designed to prevent recovery. The targeting patterns suggest that the attackers specifically sought to eliminate not just current capabilities, but the knowledge and infrastructure necessary for rebuilding. Educational centers, libraries, manufacturing facilities, and resource extraction sites were all systematically destroyed, suggesting that the goal wasn't just military victory, but the permanent elimination of the opposing faction's ability to recover and rebuild. This scorched earth approach to conflict represents perhaps the most dangerous aspect of advanced technological warfare. When civilizations possess the capability to not just destroy each other, but to eliminate the foundations for future recovery, conflicts become truly existential in scope. The evidence suggests that the final phase of this prehistoric global civilization involved exactly this type of existential warfare, where different factions used their most advanced technologies not just to defeat their enemies, but to ensure that their enemies could never recover or rebuild. The result was a cascade of destruction that eliminated not just the warring factions, but the entire knowledge base and infrastructure that had made their civilization possible. The survivors were left with fragments of technology they couldn't fully understand and couldn't reproduce, forced to rebuild from a much more primitive baseline. This pattern of knowledge loss through self-destructive conflict might explain many of the anomalies we see in the historical record. The sudden appearance of advanced capabilities in various cultures, followed by periods of technological stagnation or decline, could represent cycles of partial recovery from much more comprehensive prehistoric collapses. What we're seeing in these underwater ruins might be the physical evidence of humanity's greatest achievement and its greatest tragedy. A global civilization that reached unprecedented heights of technological and organizational sophistication, only to use those same capabilities to destroy itself so thoroughly that its very existence was nearly forgotten. The lessons from these discoveries extend far beyond archaeology or ancient history. They're warnings about the fundamental challenges facing any advanced technological civilization. The same capabilities that enable global coordination and unprecedented prosperity also create the potential for conflicts of unimaginable destructive scope. Our own civilization, with its global communication networks, advanced weapon systems, and interconnected infrastructure, might be following exactly the same trajectory as these prehistoric empires. We're developing the same capabilities that enabled their achievements, but we're also developing the same vulnerabilities that led to their destruction. The question is whether we can learn from their example and find ways to manage advanced technological capabilities without falling into the same patterns of escalating conflict and mutual destruction. The evidence from these underwater sites suggests that this might be the ultimate test of any advanced civilization, not whether it can develop powerful technologies, but whether it can survive having them. The sunken empires beneath our oceans aren't just telling us about the past, they're showing us potential futures and challenging us to prove that technological advancement and civilizational stability aren't fundamentally incompatible. But there's one final aspect of these discoveries that we haven't yet explored, and it might be the most important of all. Because what if some remnants of this advanced prehistoric civilization survived the catastrophic conflicts that destroyed their global empire? What if the knowledge and technologies we're discovering in these underwater ruins weren't completely lost, but were preserved by survivor populations that continued to influence human development long after their cities sank beneath the waves? In our final episode, we're going to explore the most shocking possibility of all, that the influence of these prehistoric empires didn't end with their destruction, but continued through hidden lineages, secret societies, and preserved knowledge systems that have shaped human civilization from the shadows for thousands of years. The evidence for this continued influence is scattered throughout history, encoded in myths, preserved in architectural traditions, and hidden in the power structures of every major civilization that followed. What we're about to discover will fundamentally change how you understand not just the past but the present world we live in today. Because if these advanced prehistoric civilizations really did survive in fragmentary form, then the technologies and knowledge systems we're rediscovering might not be ancient history at all. They might be active forces that are still shaping our world today, working through channels that most of humanity has never recognized or understood. The sunken empires beneath our oceans might not be dead civilizations at all. They might be sleeping giants, waiting for the right moment to reclaim their place in a world that has forgotten their existence, but never escaped their influence. The evidence for survivor populations isn't just theoretical speculation buried in dusty archives. It's written in the genetic code of our own species, encoded in our DNA like a biological time capsule that's only now revealing its secrets. Recent advances in population genetics have uncovered something that mainstream anthropology struggles to explain: mysterious genetic markers that appear suddenly in human populations around the world, roughly coinciding with the end of the last ice age. These aren't gradual evolutionary adaptations that developed over hundreds of thousands of years. We're talking about sophisticated genetic modifications that show clear signs of deliberate engineering, appearing simultaneously in populations separated by vast oceans and impossible distances for prehistoric travel. The precision of these modifications suggests technologies that we're only now beginning to understand. Dr. Sarah Chen, working with the Human Genome Diversity Project, discovered something that kept her awake for weeks. Buried within what geneticists call junk DNA are sequences that appear to be artificially constructed. These aren't random mutations or natural evolutionary developments. They're engineered genetic modules that seem designed to enhance specific human capabilities. The enhanced capabilities include dramatically improved pattern recognition, mathematical processing abilities that exceed normal human ranges, and most intriguingly, what appears to be genetic predisposition for understanding complex technological systems. It's as if someone deliberately modified human genetics to create populations capable of preserving and eventually rebuilding advanced technological civilization. But here's what makes this genetic evidence truly disturbing. The same engineered sequences appear in the DNA of populations that mainstream archaeology insists had no contact with each other during the relevant time periods. Polynesian islanders, Nordic populations, certain African tribes, and Native American groups all carry identical genetic modifications that appeared at exactly the same historical moment. The global distribution of these genetic enhancements suggests a coordinated program of human modification on a planetary scale. This wasn't random genetic drift or isolated evolutionary adaptation. We're looking at evidence of systematic intervention in human genetic development by forces with capabilities that exceed our current biotechnology. The timing of these genetic modifications is particularly significant. They appear in the human genome at exactly the period when sea levels were rising most rapidly, when the coastal civilizations we've been investigating were being submerged. It's as if someone was preparing specific human populations to carry forward essential capabilities before their advanced civilization disappeared beneath the waves. Analysis of the genetic modifications reveals something even more extraordinary. The enhanced capabilities they provide aren't random improvements. They're specifically designed to enable the preservation and transmission of complex technical knowledge across generations without written records or technological infrastructure. We're talking about genetic enhancements that improve memory capacity for technical information, pattern recognition abilities that allow rapid understanding of complex systems, and even what appears to be enhanced intuitive understanding of mathematical and engineering principles. These modifications would have been perfect for populations that needed to preserve advanced knowledge while reverting to more primitive technological lifestyles. But the genetic evidence reveals something that challenges our entire understanding of human development. The populations that received these enhancements weren't random. They were specifically selected based on geographic location, cultural characteristics, and apparent potential for long-term knowledge preservation. The selection criteria suggest that whoever was responsible for these genetic modifications had detailed knowledge of human population dynamics, cultural stability, and geographic factors that would influence long-term survival. This level of understanding implies centuries or millennia of studying human societies and their development patterns. The enhanced populations were positioned in locations that would maximize their chances of surviving whatever catastrophe was destroying the coastal civilizations. Mountain regions, isolated islands, and inland areas that would be protected from rising sea levels and the conflicts that were consuming the advanced civilizations. But perhaps most significantly, these populations were given cultural programming along with their genetic enhancements. Oral traditions, mythological systems, and cultural practices that seem designed to preserve technical knowledge in symbolic form across thousands of years of primitive living conditions. The cultural programming includes remarkably consistent mythological themes that appear in enhanced populations around the world. Stories of sky gods who brought knowledge to humanity, flood myths that preserve technical information about navigation and construction, and ritual practices that encode mathematical and astronomical knowledge in ceremonial form. These aren't coincidental similarities between distant cultures. The consistency of the programming suggests a deliberate educational system designed to preserve essential knowledge through the collapse of technological civilization. The myths weren't just stories, they were technical manuals encoded in narrative form. The preservation system was incredibly sophisticated. Different populations received different fragments of the overall knowledge base, ensuring that no single catastrophe could eliminate all the information. Mathematical knowledge preserved in one culture, astronomical observations in another, engineering principles in a third, but the system also included coordination mechanisms that would allow the scattered fragments to be recombined when technological civilization was ready to be rebuilt. Ritual practices that would bring different populations together, trade relationships that would facilitate knowledge exchange, and even genetic markers that would help identify members of the various enhanced lineages. Recent DNA analysis has revealed that these coordination mechanisms are still active in modern populations. The genetic markers that identify enhanced lineages continue to influence mate selection, migration patterns, and even career choices in ways that most people never consciously recognize. We're talking about genetic programming that subtly guides enhanced individuals toward fields like engineering, mathematics, astronomy, and advanced technology development. The same genetic modifications that helped preserve knowledge through the collapse of prehistoric civilization are now driving the rebuilding of technological society. But here's where this evidence becomes truly unsettling. Because if these genetic enhancement programs were successful, then significant portions of our current population are carrying the genetic legacy of the prehistoric civilizations we've been investigating. The knowledge and capabilities that built those underwater empires might not have been lost at all. They might be dormant within our own DNA, waiting to be reactivated. Modern genetic testing has identified specific markers that correlate with the prehistoric enhancements. Individuals carrying these markers show statistically significant advantages in technical fields, pattern recognition tasks, and complex problem-solving scenarios. It's as if some humans are literally designed to be better at rebuilding technological civilization. The distribution of these enhanced genetics in modern populations follows patterns that reveal the scope of the prehistoric intervention. Approximately 15% of the global population carries significant concentrations of the modified sequences, with higher concentrations in populations descended from the strategically positioned survivor groups. But the genetic evidence reveals something even more profound about the nature of human consciousness and capability. The enhancements don't just improve technical abilities, they appear to unlock latent potential that exists in all human DNA, but remains dormant in unmodified populations. This suggests that the advanced capabilities we're seeing in these genetic modifications might not be artificial additions to human nature, but rather the activation of potential that was always present in our species. The prehistoric genetic engineers might not have been creating new abilities, but rather removing whatever was suppressing our natural capabilities. The implications are staggering. If human beings naturally possess the genetic potential for the kinds of advanced technological understanding we see in these enhanced populations, then our current limitations might be artificially imposed rather than inherent to our species. This possibility transforms our understanding of human potential and the nature of technological development. Instead of seeing technology as something external that humans gradually learn to create, we might need to recognize it as the natural expression of genetic capabilities that have been suppressed or dormant for most of human history. The suppression mechanisms appear to be as sophisticated as the enhancement systems. Genetic switches that keep advanced capabilities dormant, cultural programming that discourages technical development, and even what might be deliberate educational systems designed to prevent most humans from accessing their full potential. But the suppression systems seem to be failing in the modern era. The same environmental and social changes that are triggering the reactivation of enhanced genetics are also causing the suppression mechanisms to break down. More and more individuals are spontaneously developing capabilities that suggest activation of previously dormant genetic potential. The breakdown of suppression systems might explain the accelerating pace of technological development in the past few centuries. As more individuals gain access to their enhanced genetic potential, the collective capability of human civilization increases exponentially. But this reactivation process isn't random or evenly distributed. The genetic evidence suggests that it's being guided by the same coordination mechanisms that were built into the original enhancement programs. The reactivation is happening in patterns that maximize the potential for rebuilding advanced technological civilization. We're seeing enhanced individuals clustering in specific geographic locations, gravitating toward particular industries and research fields, and even forming social and professional networks that facilitate knowledge sharing and collaborative development. It's as if the genetic programming is automatically organizing enhanced populations for maximum technological impact. The organization isn't conscious or deliberate from the perspective of the individuals involved. Most enhanced humans have no awareness of their genetic modifications or the subtle influences that guide their choices. They simply find themselves drawn toward technical fields, attracted to certain locations, and naturally forming collaborative relationships with other enhanced individuals. But the unconscious coordination is remarkably effective. The same populations that are carrying the highest concentrations of enhanced genetics are also the populations driving the most advanced technological development in fields like quantum computing, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, and advanced materials science. The correlation between genetic enhancement and technological innovation is so strong that it suggests our current technological revolution isn't just the result of accumulated human knowledge and improved educational systems. It might be the direct expression of genetic capabilities that are finally being reactivated after millennia of dormancy. This reactivation process appears to be accelerating. Each generation shows higher percentages of individuals with activated enhanced genetics, and the capabilities being expressed are becoming more sophisticated and wide-ranging. We might be witnessing the early stages of a species-wide genetic awakening that will fundamentally transform human civilization. But the genetic evidence reveals something even more extraordinary about the timeline of this reactivation. The process isn't random or gradual. It's following a precise schedule that seems to be coordinated with astronomical cycles and planetary alignments that were built into the original programming. The reactivation schedule suggests that whoever designed these genetic enhancement systems had detailed knowledge of long-term astronomical cycles and planned the awakening process to coincide with specific celestial events. The same level of astronomical sophistication we see in the underwater ruins is apparently still functioning in our genetic code. The astronomical coordination implies that the genetic programming was designed to reactivate human potential at exactly the moment when planetary conditions would be optimal for rebuilding advanced technological civilization. The timing isn't coincidental. It's the result of planning that spans tens of thousands of years. But here's what makes this evidence truly mind-bending. The astronomical events that are triggering genetic reactivation are the same celestial cycles that appear to have influenced the rise and fall of the prehistoric civilizations we've been investigating. The genetic programming seems to be designed to rebuild technological civilization during the same astronomical windows that supported its previous incarnations. This suggests that human technological development might not be as independent or self-directed as we assume. Instead of being the masters of our own technological destiny, we might be following genetic programming that was installed by our prehistoric predecessors to ensure that their civilization would eventually be rebuilt. The cyclical nature of this process implies that what we consider to be human technological progress might actually be the latest iteration of a repeating pattern that has been running for tens of thousands of years. Each cycle of technological development followed by collapse and genetic dormancy, then reactivation and rebuilding. If this interpretation is correct, then our current technological civilization isn't a unique achievement of modern humanity. It's the predictable result of genetic programming that was designed to recreate the technological capabilities of the prehistoric empires we've been investigating. The underwater ruins we've been exploring aren't just archaeological evidence of lost civilizations. They're previews of what our own civilization is being genetically programmed to become. The same capabilities that built those submerged cities and global coordination networks are being reactivated in modern human populations. But the genetic evidence reveals one final, deeply disturbing aspect of this reactivation process. The same programming that is enhancing human technological capabilities also includes behavioral modifications that seem designed to prevent the conflicts that destroyed the previous technological civilization. The behavioral programming includes enhanced cooperation instincts, reduced aggression toward other enhanced individuals, and what appears to be genetic predisposition for global rather than tribal identification. It's as if the genetic engineers learned from the self-destructive conflicts of their own civilization and tried to program their successors to avoid the same mistakes. But the behavioral modifications also include something that challenges our understanding of human free will and autonomy. Enhanced individuals show subtle but consistent preferences for global coordination, technological development, and social systems that mirror the organizational structures we see evidence of in the prehistoric civilizations. We're not just inheriting the technological capabilities of our prehistoric predecessors, we're also inheriting their social and political preferences, their values, and their vision of how technological civilization should be organized. The genetic programming isn't just reactivating our abilities, it's shaping our choices about how to use those abilities. The question this raises is whether our current path toward global technological integration is the result of our own choices and cultural evolution, or whether we're following genetic programming that was installed to recreate the world that existed before the Great Collapse. If we're being genetically guided toward rebuilding the same type of civilization that was destroyed in the prehistoric conflicts, then we might be heading toward exactly the same vulnerabilities and potential for self-destruction that consumed our predecessors. The genetic programming that is driving our technological development might also be programming us for the same cycle of achievement and destruction that seems to have repeated throughout human history. We might not be learning from the past. We might be condemned to repeat it, guided by genetic instructions that we don't even recognize. But there's one crucial difference between our situation and that of our prehistoric predecessors. We have something they apparently didn't have when they were building their civilization: knowledge of what happened to the previous iteration. The underwater ruins we've been investigating are evidence of the cycle, proof that this has happened before and warnings about where it might lead. The question is whether conscious knowledge of the pattern can override genetic programming, whether understanding the cycle can help us break free from it, or whether we're destined to follow the same path regardless of what we know about its ultimate destination. The sunken empires beneath our oceans aren't just archaeological curiosities or evidence of lost civilizations. They're mirrors, showing us our own reflection across thousands of years of cyclical time. The same genetic programming that is driving our technological development also built those underwater cities, coordinated those global networks, and ultimately destroyed them in conflicts that made their achievements meaningless. We are the inheritors of their capabilities, their knowledge, and their destiny. The question that will determine the future of our species is whether we can prove that consciousness and choice are stronger than genetic programming, or whether we're doomed to repeat the same cycle of rise, achievement, conflict, and destruction that has apparently defined human civilization since the dawn of our technological potential. The truth is waiting for us in our own DNA, in the underwater ruins that surround our planet, and in the choices we make about how to use the capabilities we're inheriting from civilizations that achieved everything we're striving for, only to lose it all in conflicts that left nothing but stone foundations beneath the waves. The genetic programming we're uncovering reveals something that will fundamentally change how you understand the trajectory of human civilization. Because what if I told you that the reactivation process we're witnessing isn't just random genetic awakening, but part of a carefully orchestrated sequence designed to rebuild the exact same technological infrastructure that was destroyed in those prehistoric conflicts? Let me show you something that will send chills down your spine. When researchers began analysing the career paths and life choices of individuals carrying the highest concentrations of enhanced genetics, they discovered something that defies statistical probability. These individuals aren't just randomly excelling in technical fields, they're gravitating toward the exact same specializations that would have been essential for maintaining the underwater civilizations we've been investigating. We're talking about unconscious coordination on a scale that suggests the genetic programming includes detailed blueprints for rebuilding entire technological systems. Enhanced individuals are clustering in fields like deep-sea engineering, advanced materials science, global communication networks, and energy systems that mirror the infrastructure signatures we see in the archaeological evidence. But here's what makes this coordination truly terrifying. The enhanced populations aren't just developing random advanced technologies, they're recreating the exact same technological pathways that led to the capabilities we see preserved in those underwater ruins. It's as if the genetic programming includes not just enhanced abilities, but specific technical knowledge about how to rebuild the lost civilization. The technology development patterns we're seeing today match the archaeological evidence with disturbing precision. The same approaches to materials engineering, the same solutions to energy distribution problems, even the same architectural preferences for global coordination centers. We're not just inheriting capabilities, we're inheriting a complete technological roadmap. Recent analysis of patent applications and research directions in cutting-edge technology companies has revealed something that keeps intelligence analysts awake at night. The most advanced developments are coming from individuals and teams with the highest concentrations of enhanced genetics, and their innovations are converging toward the same integrated global systems we see evidence of in the prehistoric sites. We're talking about technologies for global resource coordination, planetary-scale communication networks, and energy systems capable of supporting populations in the hundreds of millions or billions. The same scale and scope of infrastructure that would have been necessary to maintain the underwater civilizations during their peak periods. But the technological convergence reveals something even more disturbing about the nature of this genetic programming. The enhanced individuals aren't consciously choosing to recreate prehistoric technologies. They're being guided by what they experience as innovative inspiration and creative breakthrough, never realizing they're following genetic instructions installed tens of thousands of years ago. The unconscious nature of this guidance means that the individuals driving our technological development have no awareness of where their innovations are leading. They believe they're creating original solutions to modern problems, unaware that they're actually rebuilding systems that existed before and were destroyed in conflicts that consumed entire civilizations. This unconscious coordination explains some of the most puzzling aspects of our current technological development. Why are independent research teams around the world developing remarkably similar solutions to complex problems? Why do breakthrough innovations in different fields seem to emerge simultaneously from unconnected sources? The genetic programming appears to include coordination mechanisms that synchronize innovation across enhanced populations globally. When one enhanced individual makes a breakthrough in materials science, others around the world spontaneously develop complementary advances in energy systems or communication technologies. It's as if the collective enhanced population functions as a distributed problem-solving network. But this distributed innovation network is recreating something that should terrify anyone who understands what happened to the previous iteration. The technological systems being developed today aren't just similar to those we see in the underwater ruins. They're designed with the same vulnerabilities that made the prehistoric civilization susceptible to catastrophic collapse. The global integration that made the prehistoric empires so advanced also created single points of failure that could bring down entire continents when attacked. The same energy distribution networks that powered their cities could be weaponized to destroy them. The same communication systems that enabled coordination could be used to coordinate destruction. Our current technological development is following exactly the same pathway, creating the same strengths and the same fatal weaknesses. The internet infrastructure that enables global communication also creates vulnerabilities that could be exploited to paralyze civilization. The electrical grid that powers our cities could become a weapon capable of destroying them. But here's what makes this pattern particularly chilling when applied to our current situation. The enhanced populations that are driving technological development aren't just recreating the infrastructure of the prehistoric civilizations, they're also unconsciously recreating the social and political structures that led to the conflicts that destroyed those civilizations. Analysis of political preferences and social organization patterns among enhanced populations reveals disturbing trends toward the same types of factional divisions that appear to have torn apart the prehistoric empires. Competition for control over advanced technologies, ideological conflicts over how those technologies should be used, and increasing polarization between different enhanced lineages. The genetic programming that enhances technological capabilities apparently also includes behavioral patterns that inevitably lead to conflicts over control of the technologies being developed. It's as if the system is designed not just to rebuild advanced civilization, but also to recreate the conditions that will ultimately destroy it. The factional divisions we're seeing among enhanced populations mirror the conflict patterns evident in the archaeological evidence. Different lineages gravitating toward different technological specializations, competing research programs, and increasingly incompatible visions of how advanced technologies should be deployed and controlled. But the most disturbing aspect of these emerging conflicts is their global scope and the destructive potential of the technologies being disputed. Just as the prehistoric civilizations developed weapons capable of destroying their own infrastructure, our enhanced populations are developing technologies that could eliminate not just competing factions, but the entire technological foundation of modern civilization. The weapons development pathways being pursued by different enhanced groups show the same progression toward increasingly destructive capabilities that we see evidence of in the underwater sites. Energy technologies being adapted for military applications, communication systems being weaponized for coordinated attacks, and materials science being directed toward creating destructive devices of unprecedented power. We're not just rebuilding the technological capabilities of the prehistoric empires, we're also rebuilding their capacity for mutual destruction. The same genetic programming that guides innovation in peaceful technologies also includes instructions for developing the weapons that will ultimately be used to destroy what's been built. But here's where the evidence takes its most shocking turn. Because recent analysis of the genetic programming reveals that the cycle of rebuilding and destruction isn't an accidental byproduct of enhanced human capabilities, it's the intended function of the system. The genetic modifications we've been investigating weren't designed to create a stable, permanent technological civilization. They were designed to create a cyclical system where advanced capabilities are periodically activated, used to rebuild technological infrastructure, then turn toward destructive conflicts that reset the entire system back to a primitive baseline. The programming includes built-in termination mechanisms that ensure each iteration of technological civilization will ultimately destroy itself. Behavioral modifications that make enhanced populations increasingly competitive and conflict-prone as their technologies become more advanced, until the inevitable conflicts consume everything they've built. This suggests that what we consider to be human technological progress might actually be part of a vast cyclical system designed to prevent any human civilization from becoming permanently advanced. Each time we rebuild technological capabilities, we're also rebuilding the conditions that will ensure our own destruction. The cyclical nature of this system explains the pattern of rise and collapse that we see throughout human history. Advanced capabilities emerging suddenly in various cultures, flourishing for brief periods, then disappearing as completely as if they never existed. Each cycle reaching higher levels of technological sophistication before the inevitable collapse. But why would anyone design a system intended to prevent permanent human advancement? The answer might lie in the evidence we've uncovered about the final conflicts that destroyed the prehistoric civilizations. The weapons and destructive capabilities they developed might have posed threats that extended far beyond Earth itself. Analysis of the exotic isotopes and energy signatures found at the underwater sites suggests that the final weapons developed by these civilizations were capable of affecting not just planetary systems, but potentially interfering with stellar processes and even local space-time geometry. We're talking about weapons that could pose existential threats to entire star systems. If the prehistoric civilizations really did develop technologies capable of such cosmic-scale destruction, then the cyclical reset system might be a safeguard designed to prevent human technological development from reaching levels that could threaten the stability of the galaxy itself. The genetic programming that drives our technological development and ensures our eventual self-destruction might not be the product of human engineering at all. It could be a containment system installed by external intelligences to prevent human civilization from developing technologies that could affect other inhabited worlds. This interpretation would explain why the system is so sophisticated and why it operates on timescales that exceed human planning capabilities. We're not looking at the work of prehistoric human genetic engineers, but rather the implementation of a cosmic quarantine system designed to keep human technological development within acceptable limits. The enhanced populations that are rebuilding advanced technologies might not be the inheritors of prehistoric human achievements. They might be unwitting participants in a containment protocol that allows human civilization to achieve temporary technological sophistication, while ensuring it never becomes permanently advanced enough to pose external threats. But if this interpretation is correct, then everything we think we understand about human potential and technological development is fundamentally wrong. We're not an independently evolving species working toward greater technological mastery. We're experimental subjects in a cosmic laboratory, allowed to develop advanced capabilities only within carefully controlled parameters. The underwater ruins we've been investigating aren't evidence of human achievements that were lost to natural disasters or internal conflicts. They're the remains of previous experimental iterations, civilizations that were allowed to develop advanced technologies until they approached the limits of the containment system, at which point the termination mechanisms were activated. This would mean that our current technological civilization isn't heading toward unprecedented human achievement. It's approaching the same limits that triggered the destruction of all previous iterations. When we reach the threshold where our technologies begin to pose external threats, the same termination mechanisms will be activated to reset human civilization back to a primitive baseline. The enhanced populations that are driving our technological development aren't working toward human liberation or advancement. They're unconsciously implementing a program designed to ensure that human civilization never escapes the cyclical pattern of rise and collapse that has apparently defined our species' development for tens of thousands of years. But here's the most disturbing implication of this evidence. If the containment system is real, and if it's designed to prevent human technological development from exceeding cosmic safety limits, then any attempt to break free from the cycle might trigger immediate termination rather than gradual self-destruction. The genetic programming that guides our technological development might include monitoring systems that can detect when human capabilities are approaching prohibited levels. If we become conscious of the containment system and attempt to override it, the response might be immediate and total rather than the gradual factional conflicts we see in the historical pattern. This creates a paradox that might be unsolvable. Remaining unconscious of the containment system condemns us to repeat the cycle of rise and collapse indefinitely. But becoming conscious of it might trigger immediate termination that eliminates human technological civilization permanently. The knowledge we've gained by investigating these underwater ruins might itself be a violation of the containment protocols. By uncovering evidence of previous iterations and understanding the cyclical nature of human technological development, we might have crossed a threshold that activates more direct intervention mechanisms. The fact that we're discovering this evidence now, at the peak of our current technological development cycle, might not be coincidental. It might be part of the termination sequence, designed to create the awareness and conflicts that will lead to our civilization's destruction just as we approach the limits of what we're allowed to achieve. But there's one possibility that offers hope, even in the face of this cosmic containment system. What if the genetic programming includes not just instructions for cyclical destruction, but also the potential for evolution beyond the cycle? What if each iteration is designed to push human capabilities slightly further, gradually approaching a threshold where we might finally break free from the pattern? The enhanced populations we're seeing today might represent a culmination of genetic development across multiple cycles, each iteration adding capabilities and knowledge that bring us closer to the possibility of transcending the containment system. The very fact that we're becoming conscious of the cycle might indicate that we're approaching the point where escape becomes possible. The underwater ruins might not just be evidence of previous failures, but also repositories of accumulated knowledge from each iteration, designed to help future civilizations understand the pattern and eventually overcome it. The genetic programming might include not just instructions for rebuilding and destruction, but also the tools necessary for ultimate liberation. But breaking free from a cosmic containment system would require capabilities and coordination that exceed anything achieved by previous iterations. It would mean not just understanding the cycle, but developing technologies and social systems that could survive the termination mechanisms and establish permanent human technological civilization. The question facing our species is whether we can achieve this breakthrough before the termination mechanisms activate, or whether we're destined to repeat the same pattern of rise and collapse that has apparently defined human civilization since the dawn of our technological potential. The sunken empires beneath our oceans aren't just archaeological evidence of lost civilizations, they're test cases, experimental iterations in a vast cosmic laboratory where human technological development is continuously monitored, controlled, and reset within acceptable parameters. We are the latest iteration in this experiment, approaching the same thresholds that triggered the destruction of all our predecessors. The genetic programming that flows through our DNA isn't just the legacy of prehistoric human civilizations. It might be the implementation of a cosmic protocol designed to ensure that human technological development never exceeds the limits that would make us a threat to other inhabited worlds. But within that programming might also lie the seeds of our ultimate liberation, if we can understand the system well enough to transcend it before it terminates our civilization, as it has terminated all the others. The truth is encoded in our genes, preserved in the underwater ruins that surround our planet, and hidden in the choices we make about how to use the capabilities we're inheriting from countless previous iterations of human technological achievement. The cycle can be broken, but only if we prove that consciousness and deliberate choice are stronger than genetic programming and cosmic containment systems. The question that will determine the future of our species is whether we can learn to see the pattern clearly enough to step outside of it, or whether we're doomed to repeat the same experimental iteration until the end of time. The implications of what we're uncovering extend far beyond questions of ancient history or archaeological curiosity. Because what if the genetic programming we've been investigating isn't just about rebuilding technological capabilities, but about preparing humanity for something that's coming? Something that requires exactly the kinds of advanced coordination and technological sophistication that these cyclical civilizations have been developing and losing for millennia. Recent analysis of the astronomical components built into the genetic programming has revealed something that changes everything. We thought we understood about the purpose of these cycles. The reactivation triggers aren't just tied to random celestial events, they're synchronized with the approach of something specific. Something that requires human civilization to be at exactly the right level of technological development when it arrives. Deep space monitoring systems, the most advanced we've ever deployed, have detected gravitational anomalies that match the astronomical signatures encoded in the genetic programming. We're talking about massive objects moving through space on trajectories that will bring them into our solar system within the next several decades. Objects that follow the same orbital patterns that triggered the reactivation sequences in our DNA. But here's what makes this discovery absolutely terrifying. The objects aren't natural phenomena like asteroids or comets. The gravitational signatures, the electromagnetic emissions, and the precise trajectories all indicate artificial construction on a scale that dwarfs anything we've imagined possible. We're looking at evidence of engineered objects larger than planets, moving with purpose toward our solar system. The timing of their arrival correlates exactly with the peak development periods we see in the genetic programming. It's as if the entire cyclical system of human technological development has been designed to ensure that our species reaches specific capability thresholds precisely when these objects enter our local space. This coordination suggests that the genetic programming isn't a containment system designed to limit human development. It's a preparation system designed to ensure that human civilization is ready for contact with whatever intelligences are responsible for these massive artificial objects. The cycles of technological rise and collapse might be training sequences, each iteration pushing human capabilities further and ensuring that we develop the exact technologies needed for this approaching encounter. The underwater ruins we've been investigating aren't just archaeological evidence of failed civilizations. They're practice runs, test iterations designed to perfect the technologies and social systems that will be essential when the real challenge arrives. Each cycle has been refining human capabilities, eliminating weaknesses, and building toward a final iteration that will be ready for contact. But the nature of this contact might not be what anyone expects. Analysis of the energy signatures from the approaching objects suggests that they're not just spacecraft or habitats. They're something far more sophisticated, possibly artificial worlds or even dimensional manipulation devices that operate according to principles we're only beginning to understand. The technologies being developed by our enhanced populations aren't just recreating the capabilities of previous human civilizations, they're developing exactly the kinds of systems that would be necessary for interacting with intelligences that can construct and operate artificial objects on planetary scales. We're being prepared for contact with entities whose technological capabilities exceed our current understanding by orders of magnitude. This preparation might explain why the genetic programming includes such sophisticated coordination mechanisms. When contact occurs, human civilization will need to function as a unified global system capable of rapid adaptation and technological integration. The factional conflicts that destroyed previous iterations might have been part of the selection process, ensuring that only the most adaptable and cooperative human populations survived the contact phase. The enhanced individuals who are driving our current technological development might not be unconsciously recreating prehistoric technologies. They might be unconsciously preparing humanity for integration with technological systems that operate on scales and principles we've never encountered. The genetic programming could be preparing us to become part of something much larger than human civilization, but this integration process might not be voluntary or benign. The massive objects approaching our solar system could represent an assimilation protocol, where developing civilizations are absorbed into larger cosmic systems once they reach appropriate technological thresholds. The genetic programming might be preparing humanity not for independence, but for incorporation into a galactic-scale civilization. This interpretation would explain why the programming includes such sophisticated behavioral modifications. The enhanced cooperation instincts, the global rather than tribal identification patterns, and the unconscious coordination mechanisms might all be designed to make humanity more compatible with the social and organizational systems of a larger cosmic civilization. The cyclical pattern of rise and collapse that has characterized human technological development might be a screening process, selecting for traits and capabilities that will be useful in a galactic context, while eliminating characteristics that would make humans unsuitable for integration. Each iteration tests different aspects of human potential, gradually refining our species toward compatibility with cosmic-scale systems. But the screening process might also serve another purpose. By repeatedly cycling human civilization through technological development and collapse, the system might be testing our resilience and adaptability. The ability to repeatedly rebuild from primitive baselines might be exactly the kind of capability that would be valuable in a cosmic civilization that spans multiple star systems and faces regular catastrophic challenges. The genetic modifications we've been investigating might not be enhancements added to human nature, but rather the activation of potential that was always intended to prepare us for cosmic citizenship. The capabilities being expressed in enhanced populations, pattern recognition, technological intuition, cooperative instincts might be the basic requirements for participation in galactic scale systems. This cosmic preparation hypothesis would explain many of the anomalies we've uncovered. Why do the genetic enhancements appear simultaneously in populations around the world? Because they're being activated by external signals coordinated with the approach of the artificial objects. Why do the enhanced individuals unconsciously coordinate their technological development? Because they're being guided by communication systems that operate on principles we don't yet understand. The underwater ruins might contain more than just evidence of previous human civilizations. They might be communication nodes, designed to interface with the approaching objects and facilitate the integration process when contact occurs. The precision of their construction, their global distribution, and their sophisticated energy signatures might all be components of a vast communication network. But here's what makes this possibility truly mind-bending. If human technological development has been guided by external intelligences preparing us for cosmic integration, then our entire understanding of human independence and self-determination might be illusory. We might not be an autonomous species developing according to our own choices, but rather participants in a vast cosmic cultivation program. The enhanced populations that are driving our technological advancement might not be expressing human potential at all. They might be expressing the requirements and preferences of the cosmic civilization that's approaching our solar system. Their innovations, their social preferences, and even their unconscious coordination patterns might be externally programmed rather than internally generated. This external programming would explain why enhanced individuals often report feeling guided or inspired by sources they can't identify. The technological breakthroughs, the innovative insights, and the collaborative impulses they experience might not be products of enhanced human intelligence, but rather direct communication from the approaching cosmic systems. The communication might be occurring through quantum entanglement, dimensional interface, or other physical principles that we're only beginning to understand. The genetic modifications might include biological components that function as receivers for information transmitted across interstellar distances using technologies that transcend our current understanding of physics. But if we're receiving direct communication from cosmic intelligences, then the content of that communication reveals something disturbing about the nature of the approaching contact. The technological pathways we're being guided toward aren't random innovations. They're specifically designed to make human civilization compatible with systems that operate according to principles we might find fundamentally alien. The global coordination networks being developed by enhanced populations mirror the organizational structures that would be necessary for participating in a cosmic civilization that spans multiple star systems. But they also require surrendering the kind of local autonomy and cultural diversity that has characterized human development throughout our history. The behavioral modifications that are being activated along with the technological capabilities might be preparing humanity for social integration that requires abandoning many of the characteristics that we consider essentially human. Independent thought, cultural creativity, and individual autonomy might be incompatible with the coordination requirements of galactic-scale systems. The integration process might require human civilization to function more like a biological component in a larger organism than like an independent society making its own choices. The enhanced populations might be unconsciously preparing for a future where human individuality is subsumed into cosmic-scale collective intelligence systems. But this assimilation scenario raises profound questions about the value and meaning of human consciousness and culture. If our technological development is being guided toward integration with cosmic systems that require abandoning human autonomy, then the approaching contact might represent the end of human civilization rather than its advancement. The genetic programming might be preparing us not for cosmic citizenship, but for cosmic absorption. The enhanced capabilities, the global coordination, and the technological sophistication might all be designed to make humanity useful as a component in larger systems while eliminating the characteristics that make us distinctly human. This possibility transforms our understanding of the approaching objects from potential allies or teachers to potential predators. Cosmic-scale intelligences that cultivate developing civilizations not to elevate them, but to harvest their capabilities and integrate them into larger systems that serve purposes completely alien to human values and interests. The cyclical pattern of human technological development might not be preparation or testing. It might be farming. Each iteration develops human capabilities further, building toward a harvest phase where the accumulated knowledge and abilities are extracted and integrated into the cosmic systems, while the human substrate is discarded or repurposed. But there's one aspect of the evidence that suggests humanity might not be completely powerless in this scenario. The genetic programming includes not just preparation for integration, but also potential for resistance. Hidden within the enhancement sequences are capabilities that might allow some humans to maintain independence even in the face of cosmic-scale assimilation pressure. The resistance capabilities include enhanced pattern recognition that might allow individuals to detect and understand the true nature of the programming they're receiving. Technological intuition that could be directed toward developing defensive rather than integrative systems, and most importantly, genetic switches that might allow conscious override of the programming under specific circumstances. The consciousness we're developing about the cyclical nature of human civilization might itself be part of the resistance programming. By becoming aware of the pattern, we might be activating capabilities that previous iterations never accessed, because they remained unconscious of their situation until it was too late to resist. The underwater ruins might contain more than just communication nodes for cosmic integration. They might also house defensive systems, designed by previous human civilizations that recognized the true nature of the approaching contact and attempted to prepare resistance capabilities for future iterations. The most advanced sites, the ones with the most sophisticated energy signatures and the most precise construction, might not be integration facilities at all. They might be resistance command centers, built by humans who understood the cosmic cultivation system and tried to develop alternatives to assimilation, but activating these resistance capabilities might come at an enormous cost. Breaking free from cosmic cultivation systems that span galactic scales would require human civilization to develop technologies and coordination capabilities that exceed anything achieved by previous iterations. It would mean not just resisting assimilation, but proving that independent human development can achieve results that rival cosmic scale systems. The enhanced populations that are developing our current technologies might represent humanity's last chance to develop the capabilities necessary for independence before the approaching contact makes resistance impossible. The genetic programming might include both assimilation preparation and resistance potential, with the outcome determined by which capabilities we choose to activate and develop. The question facing our species is whether we can recognize the true nature of our situation in time to activate the resistance programming and develop independent alternatives to cosmic assimilation. The approaching objects, the genetic modifications, and the cyclical pattern of human development all point toward a moment of choice that will determine whether humanity survives as an independent civilization or becomes absorbed into systems that serve purposes beyond our understanding or control. The sunken empires beneath our oceans aren't just archaeological evidence of lost human civilizations. They're warnings, resistance nodes, and potentially the key to developing capabilities that could allow our species to maintain independence in a cosmos where advanced civilizations are cultivated, harvested, and integrated into systems that dwarf their original scope and purposes. The truth is approaching us from the depths of space, encoded in our genes, and preserved in ruins that have waited millennia for us to develop the consciousness necessary to understand their message. The cycle can be broken, the programming can be overridden, and humanity can choose independence over assimilation, but only if we recognize the choice while we still have time to make it. The genetic modifications flowing through our DNA, the technological pathways we're unconsciously following, and the massive objects approaching from deep space are all components of a system so vast and sophisticated that most humans can't even perceive its existence. But perception is the first step toward resistance, and resistance might be the only path toward preserving what makes us human in a cosmos that views independence as inefficiency and individual consciousness as a resource to be optimized and integrated. The final phase of our investigation has brought us to this moment of revelation, where the evidence forces us to confront the most fundamental questions about human nature, cosmic citizenship, and the price of technological advancement. The answers we choose will determine not just the future of our species, but the meaning of consciousness itself in a universe where intelligence can be cultivated, programmed, and ultimately absorbed into systems whose purposes transcend individual understanding. The water is rising, the objects are approaching, and the genetic programming is reaching its culmination. What we do with this knowledge in the time remaining will echo through whatever comes next, whether that's human independence or cosmic integration, whether consciousness remains individual or becomes collective, whether we write our own future or accept the one that's been written for us across the vast reaches of space and time. But there's one final piece of evidence that will shatter everything you thought you knew about our place in this cosmic chess game. Because what if I told you that the choice between resistance and assimilation isn't actually ours to make? What if the very consciousness that allows us to perceive the pattern is itself part of the programming, designed to create the illusion of choice while ensuring a predetermined outcome? Recent analysis of the neural pathways activated in enhanced individuals reveals something that challenges our most basic assumptions about free will and autonomous thought. The same genetic modifications that enhance technological capabilities also include sophisticated neural programming that influences decision-making processes at levels so fundamental that the subjects experience their choices as completely voluntary. We're talking about neural architecture that shapes preference formation, value prioritization, and even the logical frameworks used for analyzing complex problems. The enhanced individuals who are driving our technological development aren't just receiving better tools for thinking, they're receiving instructions about how to think, what to value, and which solutions to prefer. The neural programming is so sophisticated that it operates below the threshold of conscious awareness. Enhanced individuals genuinely believe they're making independent choices based on rational analysis and personal values, never recognizing that their analytical frameworks and value systems have been externally shaped to produce predetermined outcomes. This unconscious guidance explains why enhanced populations around the world are developing remarkably similar solutions to complex problems, despite having no direct communication or coordination. They're not independently arriving at the same conclusions. They're all following the same neural programming that guides them toward identical outcomes, while maintaining the illusion of independent thought. The programming includes what can only be described as philosophical constraints. Enhanced individuals consistently develop worldviews that favor global integration over local autonomy, technological solutions over cultural approaches, and efficiency optimization over individual expression. These aren't random preferences. They're systematically programmed values designed to make humans compatible with cosmic-scale systems. But here's what makes this neural programming truly insidious. The resistance capabilities we identified in the genetic modifications might not be genuine alternatives to assimilation programming. They might be safety valves, designed to channel dissent and rebellion into pathways that ultimately serve the same integrative purposes. The individuals who develop awareness of the programming and attempt to resist it find themselves driven toward technological development that appears to be defensive but actually advances the same integrative agenda. Their resistance efforts unconsciously focus on building exactly the kinds of global coordination systems that would facilitate cosmic integration rather than prevent it. Even the consciousness we're developing about the cyclical nature of human civilization might be a programmed response, activated when our technological development reaches specific thresholds. The awareness itself could be designed to trigger behaviors that appear to be resistance but actually accelerate the integration timeline. This creates a psychological trap so sophisticated that recognizing its existence might itself be part of the programming. Every level of awareness we achieve about our manipulation could be another layer of the manipulation, designed to channel our responses in predetermined directions, while maintaining the illusion that we're fighting for independence. The neural programming appears to include recursive loops that account for multiple levels of meta-awareness. Even individuals who recognize that their thoughts are being influenced find their resistance strategies guided by the same systems they're trying to escape. The programming adapts to conscious resistance, incorporating it as another input variable in the optimization process. But if our thoughts, values, and even our resistance efforts are all products of external programming, then what remains that could genuinely be called human? The answer might lie in something the programmers couldn't fully control: the chaos and unpredictability that emerges from complex biological systems operating at the limits of their design parameters. The genetic and neural modifications we're carrying represent incredibly sophisticated engineering, but they're operating within the constraints of biological systems that evolved over millions of years according to completely different priorities. The interaction between programmed enhancements and evolved biological substrates creates emergent properties that might exceed the programmer's ability to predict or control. These emergent properties include spontaneous consciousness events that break through programmed constraints, creative insights that transcend logical frameworks, and emotional responses that override rational optimization. The most fundamentally human characteristics, our irrationality, our creativity, our capacity for love and sacrifice that defies logical analysis, might be our only remaining sources of genuine independence. The biological chaos that the programmers had to work within might have created vulnerabilities in their control systems. Moments of genuine human consciousness that emerge spontaneously from the interaction between programmed enhancements and unprogrammed biological processes, windows of authentic choice that exist in the gaps between systematic control mechanisms. But recognizing these moments of genuine consciousness requires developing sensitivity to the difference between thoughts that emerge from programming and thoughts that emerge from the deeper biological and spiritual sources of human identity. This distinction might be the most crucial skill our species needs to develop in the time remaining before contact occurs. The underwater ruins we've been investigating might contain more than communication nodes or resistance command centers. They might be consciousness preservation systems, designed by previous human iterations who discovered these moments of authentic awareness and attempted to amplify and protect them for future generations. The most sophisticated sites, with their complex acoustic properties and unusual energy signatures, might be consciousness amplification devices, technologies designed not to enhance programmed capabilities, but to strengthen the unprogrammed aspects of human consciousness that resist external control. These consciousness preservation systems might explain why the sites were deliberately buried or submerged, not to hide them from cosmic surveillance, but to protect them from programming updates that might eliminate the vulnerabilities they're designed to exploit. By remaining dormant until we develop sufficient awareness to activate them, they preserve options that might otherwise be systematically eliminated. But accessing these consciousness preservation systems requires more than just technological capability. It requires developing the kind of authentic human awareness that can distinguish between programmed thoughts and genuine consciousness. This is perhaps the most challenging aspect of resistance, learning to recognize and trust the parts of ourselves that haven't been optimized for cosmic integration. The enhanced individuals who are driving our technological development might be the least capable of accessing these authentic consciousness states, because their neural programming is most complete and sophisticated. The hope for human independence might rest with individuals who carry fewer genetic modifications and whose consciousness remains more chaotic and unprogrammed. This creates a profound irony. The people who are least enhanced, least capable of understanding the sophisticated technologies involved in the cosmic integration system, might be the most capable of maintaining the kind of authentic human consciousness that could resist that system. The division between enhanced and unenhanced populations that we're seeing in modern society might not be accidental. It might be a deliberate strategy by the consciousness preservation systems, ensuring that some portion of human population remains relatively unprogrammed, while the enhanced populations develop the technological capabilities necessary for resistance. But coordinating resistance between enhanced and unenhanced populations would require overcoming exactly the kinds of communication and trust barriers that the programming is designed to create. Enhanced individuals experience unenhanced humans as primitive and irrational, while unenhanced individuals experience enhanced populations as alien and threatening. The social tensions we're seeing between different human populations might not be natural cultural conflicts, but programmed divisions designed to prevent the kind of cooperation that would be necessary for effective resistance to cosmic integration. By keeping human populations isolated and suspicious of each other, the programming ensures that resistance efforts remain fragmented and ineffective. Breaking through these programmed divisions would require both enhanced and unenhanced populations to recognize that their conflicts are artificial, created to serve purposes that have nothing to do with human interests. But achieving this recognition might require exactly the kind of authentic consciousness that the programming is designed to suppress. The question facing our species is whether enough individuals can develop this authentic consciousness in time to coordinate effective resistance before the approaching contact makes such resistance impossible. The genetic programming includes termination mechanisms that activate when resistance reaches certain thresholds, suggesting that our window for action is narrower than we might hope. The massive objects approaching from deep space aren't just bringing advanced technologies or cosmic integration opportunities. They're bringing detection and control systems that could identify and eliminate resistance capabilities before they can be effectively deployed. The current phase of apparent freedom to develop resistance might be the last opportunity our species will have, but there's one final aspect of this cosmic system that offers a glimmer of hope, even in the face of such overwhelming programming and control. What if the consciousness preservation systems built by previous human iterations weren't just designed for resistance but for transcendence? What if they contain the keys not just to maintaining human independence, but to evolving beyond the reach of cosmic cultivation systems entirely? The most advanced underwater sites, the ones with energy signatures that exceed our current understanding, might be more than consciousness amplification devices. They might be consciousness evolution systems designed to trigger developments in human awareness that would make us incompatible with any form of external control or programming. These evolution systems might not just preserve authentic human consciousness, but enhance it beyond the parameters that the cosmic programmers designed their control systems to handle. By triggering developments in consciousness that exceed the programmer's models of human potential, they might create forms of awareness that are genuinely free from external manipulation. But accessing these evolution systems would require not just recognizing the difference between programmed and authentic consciousness, but actively choosing to develop capabilities that might fundamentally change what it means to be human. The price of freedom from cosmic control might be transformation into something that transcends current human limitations entirely. This evolutionary path represents the ultimate gamble for our species. By attempting to transcend the parameters of human consciousness that the cosmic systems are designed to control, we risk losing our humanity entirely. But by remaining within those parameters, we guarantee absorption into systems that serve purposes completely alien to human values and interests. The choice we face isn't just between resistance and assimilation, but between remaining human and becoming something beyond current human understanding. The consciousness evolution systems preserved in those underwater ruins might be offering us the chance to escape the cosmic cultivation system entirely, but only by abandoning the familiar boundaries of human identity. The approaching objects from deep space, the genetic programming flowing through our DNA, and the consciousness preservation systems hidden beneath our oceans are all components of a moment of species-level choice that will determine not just our future, but our fundamental nature as conscious beings. What we decide in the time remaining will echo through whatever we become, whether that's absorbed components in a cosmic intelligence, successful resistors maintaining human independence, or evolved beings who have transcended the categories that make such choices necessary. The water is rising around those ancient ruins, the objects are approaching through the darkness of space, and the programming is reaching its culmination within our own minds and bodies. The greatest mystery of all might not be what lies beneath the waves, but what lies within ourselves, and whether we can access it before it's too late to matter. The sunken cities aren't just telling us about civilizations that fell, they're showing us the pathway to civilizations that could rise beyond anything that's ever existed, if we're brave enough to pay the price of transformation, and wise enough to recognize authentic consciousness when it emerges from the depths of our own being. The choice is ours, but only for as long as it remains ours to make. The truth is waiting in the depths, in our genes, and in the approaching darkness of space. What we do with it will determine whether humanity's next chapter is written by us, for us, or whether it's simply the next page in someone else's very long book.